Hello everyone, Dr. Stevens here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in Unit 1, our unit about how you read literature, and that's the question that we're dealing with in this unit. It's sort of an introduction to reading literature as part of an introduction to literary genres itself. We'll be dealing with that concept, literary genres, in the next unit. But I wanted to get started in the course just by asking you to think about what you think literature is and to work with your views, and to do so by reading three literary selections, three relatively short selections. That's why they're poems, okay? Now, let me explain. This is not a lecture in what I think literature is. It's not a lecture on what is literature. I'm not trying to give you my views on this subject, all right? And I'm certainly not trying to give you some kind of official scholarly view or definition of literature. What I'm trying to do is simply help you work with those questions that we're dealing with in Unit 1. So what you see on the screen here, if you get tired of looking at my face staring at you there, you can simply follow along on the main screen in your Integrity playback, which gives you a view of the handout that we're using for Unit 1. Okay, so we're going to look at these three poems. But as we do that, let's begin by looking at the questions I have asked you. Okay, so first of all, I have asked you to consider what is your view of literature. Now, let's talk a bit about what I'd like to have you do here. Certainly, I'm asking you to post a comment on the discussion board that gives your view of literature. But please don't see that as the last word, your last word on that subject. You're going to be putting down a lot of thoughts. Most of you already have. I've been looking at some of your posts. So you're going to be putting down some thoughts on what you consider literature to be, but I want you to be working with those ideas that you've put down. So you're going to be discussing those with each other. I'm going to be responding to them, and so on. So how are you going to work with them? Well, notice that the first instruction here in this little handout, and this is also the first thing that I post in the instructions for the discussion. All right, the first thing is to read these three poems. All right, so presumably you're not working in a vacuum here or working from some vague memory that you might have of reading literature. What you're going to be doing is working from your reading of these three selections. So that brings us then to our second question. How do these three poems illustrate your view? That's important. All right? So if you're going to say, well, I think literature is writing in which somebody expresses his feelings, all right? Okay, well then match that with what you see in at least one of these three poems, okay? So as you work with your view of what literature is, think of how these poems illustrate that view. Finally, I'm saying, all right, what particular means do you use to read literature? And then I give you some examples. What could be that when you're reading literature, you draw upon your knowledge, or you draw upon your attitude toward literature, right? Or reading techniques and so on. Now, we could go on. I could explain this more. Certainly, a lot of people, when they're reading literature, will draw upon reference works. You might go to a dictionary and A lot of us these days use online dictionaries, or you might use Google to search for something that you're unfamiliar with, and so on. But these are all techniques. These are all things that you do. They are means that you use to read literature. What I want to do in this little presentation is to focus on one particular technique or one particular means that I think is really important in reading literature, and that is reading out loud. And I have found over the years that when I read poems to a class, as I'm going to be doing here, right, I find that students very often say, you know, I really understood that poem better, Dr. Stevens, after I heard you read it. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing. You can read poems and other works of literature out loud to yourself. And in doing that, you will be using a technique which is often very helpful in understanding literature and, as we say, understanding what literature is. Listen to the sound of the literature, because that is one of the things that makes literature unique, makes it different from other kinds of writing. So we have here a poem called The Haunted Oak by Paul Laurence Dunbar, a very important African-American poet. And I'm not going to try to explain this poem to you. I'm not going to try to identify things that might be strange for you here. I just want to read it to you, have you listen to the sound of it, and see if, number one, the sound of the poem doesn't help you refine your views of what literature is, and number two, help you understand the poem itself. All right, so we begin with what sounds like somebody talking to somebody or something, right? Pray, why are you so bare, O bough of the old oak tree? And why, when I go through the shadow you throw, runs a shudder over me? My leaves were green as the best, I trow, and sap ran free in my veins, but I saw in the moonlight dim and weird a guiltless victim's pains. They charged him with the old crime, and set him fast in jail. Oh, why does the dog howl all night long, and why does the night wind wail? He prayed his prayer, and he swore his oath, and he raised his hand to the sky, but the beat of hoofs smote on his ear, and the steady tread drew nigh. Who is it rides by night, over the moonlit road? And what is the spur that keeps the pace? What is the galling goad? And now they beat at the prison door. Ho, keeper, do not stay. We are friends of him whom you hold within, and we fain would take him away from those who ride fast on our heels, with mind to do him wrong. They have no care for his innocence, and the rope they bear is long. They have fooled the jailer with lying words. They have fooled the man with lies. The bolts unbar, the locks are drawn, and the great door open flies. Now they have taken him from the jail, and hard and fast they ride, and the leader laughs low down his throat as they halt my trunk beside. Oh, the judge, he wore a mask of black, and the doctor one of white, and the minister with his oldest son was curiously bedight. O foolish man, why weep you now? 'Tis but a little space, and the time will come when these shall dread the memory of your face. I feel the rope against my bark, and the weight of him in my grain. I feel in the throe of his final woe the touch of my own last pain. and never more shall leaves come forth on the bough that bears the ban. I am burned with dread, I am dried and dead from the curse of a guiltless man. And ever the judge rides by, and goes to hunt the deer, and ever another rides his soul in the guise of a mortal fear. And ever the man he rides me hard, and never a night stays he, for I feel his curse as a haunted bough on the trunk of a haunted tree. Powerful poem, huh? Let's read something different. Another poem, same general category of literature, but with a different sound and a different meaning, a different way of being a poem. All right, different ways to pray by Naomi Shihab Nye, who is a 20th century Palestinian American poet. Again, I'm just going to read it. There is certainly a lot in this that we could talk about and I could explain, but the point here is simply to illustrate that reading aloud is one important technique that you can use in reading literature. There was the method of kneeling, a fine method if you lived in a country where stones were smooth. The women dreamed wistfully of bleached courtyards, hidden corners where knee fit rock. Their prayers were weathered rib bones, small calcium words uttered in sequence, as if this shedding of syllables could somehow fuse them to the sky. There were the men who had been shepherds so long they walked like sheep. Under the olive trees they raised their arms. Hear us! We have pain on earth. We have so much pain there is no place to store it. But the olives bobbed peacefully in fragrant buckets of vinegar and thyme. At night the men ate heartily flat bread and white cheese and were happy in spite of the pain, because there was also happiness. Some prized the pilgrimage, wrapping themselves in new white linen to ride buses across miles of vacant sand. When they arrived at Mecca, they would circle the holy places on foot many times. They would bend to kiss the earth and return, their lean faces housing mystery. While for certain cousins and grandmothers, the pilgrimage occurred daily, lugging water from the spring or balancing the baskets of grapes. There were the ones present at births, humming quietly to perspiring mothers, the ones stitching intricate needlework into children's dresses, forgetting how easily children soil clothes. There were those who didn't care about praying, the young ones, the ones who had been to America. They told the old ones, "You are wasting your time." Time? The old ones prayed for the young ones. They prayed for Allah to mend their brains, for the twig, the round moon, to speak suddenly in a commanding tone, and occasionally there would be the one who did none of this. The old man Fauzi, for example, Fauzi the fool, who beat everyone at dominoes, insisted he spoke with God as he spoke with goats, and was famous for his laugh. A poem about different ways of praying, and you should be able to tell from some of the references in that poem what the overall context is, the cultural context. and the religious context as well. And finally, a poem by Theodore Retke, a 20th century white American poet. All right, so we've got three ethnicities here, don't we? We have African American, we have Palestinian American, and we have white American. I knew a woman lovely in her bones. When small birds sighed, she would sigh back at them. Ah, when she moved more ways than one. The shapes a bright container can contain. Of her choice virtues only gods should speak, or English poets who grew up on Greek. I'd have them sing in chorus, cheek to cheek. How well her wishes went! She stroked my chin. She taught me turn and counter-turn and stand. She taught me touch, that undulant white skin. I nibbled meekly from her proffered hand. She was the sickle, I, poor I, the rake, coming behind her for her pretty sake. But what prodigious mowing we did make! Love likes a gander and adores a goose. Her full lips pursed the errant note to seize. She played it quick, she played it light and loose. My eyes, they dazzled at her flowing knees. Her several parts could keep a pure repose, or one hip quiver with a mobile nose. She moved in circles, and those circles moved. Let seed be grass, and grass turn into hay. I'm martyr to emotion not my own. What's freedom for? To know eternity. I swear she cast a shadow white as stone. But who would count eternity in days? These old bones live to learn her wanton ways. I measure time by how a body sways. 3 poems then, folks. You are considering what you think literature is, but you're not just pulling ideas out of the air. You're considering what literature is in terms of these 3 selections here. And you're thinking about what you do when you read these selections, and you're considering how reading them aloud might help you understand the poem, might help you understand what you think literature is. Thanks for listening, and I will see you online.